Hello, it's Classy here back with another Tribes video, and today we're going to be talking about the tier list updates. So this was a series that Painblade did, and every time the tier list would be updated, he would drop a video and showcase some of the new units and why they're placed in certain tiers. For our tier list that we're using, we've used a number system where 10 is the best and 0 is the worst, and we have Arena, Ninja World Tournament, FG, Abyss, and ATB. And if you guys like to use the Reddit tier list, the rankings are pretty much in the same areas anyways, so you can use that as well. But I like having the specific numbers for each mode here, and you can see the link above if you want to come see for yourself. So the last video of Pain's relating to tier list updates was Kid Sasuke and Kid Naruto, I believe. And we can see that both of these units have very high ratings in pretty much every single mode. ATB for Kid Naruto, obviously, it's not very useful for that. But for everything else, they're pretty much good units to put in your team for anything. And just because a unit has a lower rating doesn't mean they're not usable, but you're probably going to have better options. Now we're going to move on to KCM and Kushina. So for Kushina, she's definitely better for PvE with her kit, and we can take a look at that. But for PvP, her effects are just not that impactful. So she does some debuffs where she lowers the opponent's attack and defense stats, so all the enemies, which is pretty cool. It's better than just hitting one enemy with the effect. And her fourth skill is decent but not too impactful. It's basically just boosting some stats for attack and defense shinobi separately instead of everything. And LB2, obviously same theme, but just boosting effects for tactical shinobi. So that's why she's better off used in PvE, where you can kind of control what teams she's a part of and kind of manipulate her effects the way you want, but not for PvP. KCM has 10s across the board just because he's so good with all of his buffs, and his two jutsus both are technically insta-jutsus, and he can also nuke hard, but the main thing is the amount of buffs he brings to the whole team. That's why he's so good for every mode. Now we're moving on to Kabuto and White Mask. So Kabuto is in a similar position to Kushina. He is alright across the board, but you probably don't want to use him for ATB, and probably don't want to use him for Abyss as well. But he can lower like some of the enemies' damage effects. He can boost some damage effects for your cell. He can help with some defense, just like generic T unit effects, but not too much of them. And his fourth skill will just do more attack related debuffs for the enemy and critical rate debuffs. So honestly, I think the oh, oops. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. The 0 is for FG, which makes more sense here. I thought that was for Abyss for a second, but he is definitely useful in Abyss. But for FG and ATB, you probably don't really mind debuffing the opponent's attack stats and stuff, because you're the one who are trying to stun and deal damage to them. They're not really going to deal too much damage to you if you're doing things right. Now for White Mask, he's also not very good in FG and ATB, but he's really good in the PvP modes and also Abyss. He is a tank, he has AoE stun, which is why he's so good for those three modes. And he also does some debuffs as well, I think. Yeah, he does some debuffs, he does some buffs for your allies, just generic D unit effects. So that's why he's so good for those three modes specifically. but not the other two. Now we're moving on to Time Travel Boruto. Also good for PvP. He has a lot of defensive buffs. He has Confuse, and he can even boost status effect suppression rate, which is useful. And he also has a going last effect where he can give extra buffs when your cell is slower, so he can help you defeat the whales if you build your team right. And Abyss, you can use him as well, because tanks are definitely more useful in Abyss nowadays than FG and ATB, just because Abyss has a long turn limit and you need to try to outlast and defeat all the opponents. Now we're moving on to Tobirama and Hashirama. So Tobirama is really good for ATB and FG because of his targeting effects against T units and also his buffs for the team. Then for the two PvP modes in Abyss, he's all right, but I'd say he's pretty good. That's what those numbers mean. He does AoE. He can nuke hard, and he has extra damage against tactical shinobi, boosts a lot of crit stats for your allies, and that's why it's useful for specific targeted PvE modes where you have tactical shinobi on the opponent's team. But also in BVP, people use tactical shinobi. Hashirama also does decent in Abyss, ATB, and Arena. FG not going to be as useful because you only have 5 turns. And of course, this is referring to Master 1 and 2, so the fact that he increases the tribe gauge isn't really going to be too useful because you're only supposed to tribe once anyways, but on turn 5. After doing all of those buffs. But the tribe gauge is useful in the other modes. And he also has some debuffs as well, similar to the other 2 units we went over in this video. So pretty generic stuff. And he also has some offensive and defensive buffs for your team. I forgot to talk about vitality. That makes a difference too. His vitality could be much better. Don't really remember, but Tobirama's vitality is decent. Boruto's vitality is decent. Madara's vitality could be better. Kabuto's vitality is decent. KCM's vitality is really good. Kushina's vitality is also decent. It has some effect, but not too much effect because we have chakra generators, but I should go over those too along with the unit. Now we're moving on to Time Travel Sasuke, a monster in PvP, both Ninja World Tournament and Arena. He does defensive buffs. He can burn the targets. He can nuke really hard, actually. He can boost stats effects, suppression rate. He's like a jacked up Hidan, as I've said before. And he's just really good at his job of being a tank. His vitality is also not insta, but it's 5k initial, which is like half of insta jutsu. But you can see why he's not good for FG and ATB. He could be good maybe against A units, but you probably just have better options anyways. So you don't want to use him for those. Abyss, obviously you can use him. He's a really good tank. So you can put him in there and he'll help you outlast and do damage to the opponents. And now we're moving on to the most recent unit, which is Nagato. He has initial 5k as well, which is great. He's an he's not AoE. He's an A unit. He does good nuke damage. He can debuff the target if he doesn't kill them, which is why he's so good for PvE as well, where your opponents have a lot of health. He can boost attack for allies and other offensive stats, and most importantly, he has the forward skill where whenever you have a cell that's faster, they get the critical buffs, And this applies to any cell that you have, so that's why he's so good, just because of the constant buffing that you can get. So obviously for FG and ATB, this is really crucial. So that's a 10. Abyss, you can still use that as well because you're going to be playing a lot of turns. And PvP, he just is really good at nuking and getting chakra early and helping the team do damage. So that's pretty much it for this video. I don't want to go too in depth for every single unit. Feel free to come onto this website and actually just like read every unit specifically if you want to learn more about them. And I hope you guys enjoyed this tier list update. Thank you for watching.